Hi, friends. Today we're looking at the book of Joshua. It's part 1 of 3, and the year is 2024. Well, who am I? I'm your old pal, Papa Dale, and this is the Jan Hus Institute of Biblical Studies. This is the Bachelor of Arts in Biblical Literature degree program, and today we begin the Joshua lecture. Now, because there are always new viewers, I will briefly introduce myself. I'm a retired pastor, teacher, theologian, and professor with over 50 years of service to the Lord Jesus Christ. My name is Dale Warren, and professionally I'm known in my writing, teaching, and lectures as D.A. Warren. But my friends, they just call me Papa Dale, so you can call me Papa Dale. Now you can see the details of my personal testimony, family life, education, and ministry experience on other videos on this playlist. So for now, let's get right into today's topic. And today's topic, as I said, is Joshua Part 1. And so let's go. The book of Joshua, the 6th book of the Old Testament, narrates the dramatic transition of Israel from wandering nomads, wandering around in the wilderness, to settling in the promised land. Now they become settlers and farmers and ranchers. As a text deeply embedded in Israel's history and covenant relationship with God, the book of Joshua presents both historical narrative and theological reflection. From the dramatic conquest of Canaan to the distribution of the land among the tribes, the book reflects God's faithfulness in fulfilling his promises to his people. This article explores Joshua with an evangelical perspective, focusing on its analytical and literary aspects to understand its deeper meanings and implications for faith today. So, who's the author of the book of Joshua? Well, traditionally it's attributed to Joshua himself, though some scholars debate that, and they also debate the dating of the text. Here are the key points often cited as evangelical evidence for the traditional view of Joshua's authorship. 1. The internal evidences. The text mentions Joshua's acts and achievements. For example, Joshua 24:26 notes that Joshua, the person, the man, wrote these words in the book of the law of God, suggesting he recorded the events during or shortly after his leadership. Point 2. This is evidence for the traditional view. Point 2. The historical context. Evangelicals often argue that the details and style of the writing, including first-hand accounts of battles and geographical descriptions, align with a person who experienced those events directly. Pardon me. And so the evidence for the traditional view appeals to that historical context. There's also the idea of continuity with previous texts. The transition from the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible, traditionally attributed to Moses, to the book of Joshua is smooth and presents a continuation of the narrative regarding Israel's journey to the Promised Land, which would lend credibility to Joshua as a key figure in this context. Joshua and Moses were tight, and Joshua was appointed by Moses to be the leader that continued to lead the nation. And so this kind of continuity would speak well for Joshua being the author. So, what is the traditional evangelical evidence for Joshua's authorship? Point number 4, divine commission. Joshua is shown to be both a leader and a servant of God, with God commissioning him in Joshua 1 through 9. This divine favor can imply a special role in the writing and preservation of the covenant narrative, as well as the leading of the nation physically at the time. Evangelical support for Joshua's authorship include, number 5, support from later texts. Books later in the Old Testament, such as in the historical writings, for example, Judges, reference Joshua and the events of his leadership. These later texts can lend credence to the idea that Joshua was a prominent figure and likely involved in the recording of these events. And then point number 6, the last one we'll deal with, is the tradition of oral history. Evangelicals often note that it was common for leaders and significant figures in ancient Israel to pass down their stories. And since Joshua was a pivotal character in Israel's story, it is plausible he contributed to or oversaw the documentation of these events. While scholars and historians may present various interpretations regarding authorship, these points encapsulate the evangelical perspective supporting Joshua's authorship of the book. So now let's have a look at the impact of archaeology on the historicity of the book of Joshua. Archaeological evidence for the history of the book of Joshua has been a subject of considerable debate among scholars. While concrete archaeological verification for every event described in Joshua is elusive, several findings and studies do provide insights that some scholars interpret as supporting the historical traditional narratives in the book. Here are some key points they often appeal to. 1. Existence of the city of Jericho. Archaeological excavations at the site of Jericho, Tel Es Sultan, have revealed evidence of a collapsed city wall and destruction layers, traditionally associated with the biblical account of Joshua's conquest, Joshua chapter 6. However, the dating of these layers is debated, and some archaeologists argue that the destruction occurred long before the Israelite period, but evangelicals think they're wrong. Existence of the city of Ai. Now, this city is mentioned in Joshua chapters 7 and 8, and it has also been excavated, notably at the site of Et-Tel. Though the identification of Ai with any specific archaeological find is controversial. There is some discussion around the layers of occupation, whether they correlate with the conquest narrative, and evangelical scholars and archaeologists believe they do. Then we have point number 3, the Canaanite city-states. The destruction of various Canaanite city-states during the Late Bronze to Early Iron Age is often cited as potentially aligning with the conquests described in Joshua, though conclusions vary widely among scholars regarding causation, whether these were due to the Israelite conquests or other factors. Point number 4, the presence of Israelite settlements. Archaeological evidence of settlements attributed to the Israelites, particularly in the highlands of Canaan, show a distinct cultural shift that some date to the late 13th century BC, the time of Joshua. This aligns with the traditional dating for the conquest period, although the origin of these settlements are debated. Every one of these points, we mentioned that there is debate, and I'll reference that in just a second. Point number 5, texts and inscriptions. Some inscriptions from the period, like Merneptah stele in 1207 BC, mention Israel in Canaan, indicating that an entity known in Israel existed in that region by that time. This independently supports the historicity of the Israelite presence described in the book of Joshua. And this is an extra-biblical source, a secular source. Historical criticism. Scholars employing historical critical methods often analyze parallels between biblical accounts and other ancient Near Eastern texts, providing context for the societal and political situations described in Joshua. While some archaeological findings appear to correlate with elements of the book of Joshua, interpretations vary widely, and the evidence is not definitive. Further research, excavations, and advancements in archaeological methods may continue to shed light on this complex historical narrative. Now here's the deal, students. If you are a Bible believer, you will tend to accept the evidence for the existence of Israel in the land for Joshua and the events of the Bible. That's just the way your mindset would be. Your worldview would include that. If you are an unrepentant, skeptic, unregenerate, and you don't believe in the Bible, and your heart has not been visited by the Holy Spirit, then you're going to believe the secular, skeptical interpretation of everything. And so it's like, do you believe in the biblical story of how the world was created, or do you believe in evolution? Whether you believe in the one or the other is going to depend a lot on the status of your heart. And so here, with regard to the archaeological and historical veracity of the evidence of Israel in the land and so forth, skeptics, unrepentant, unregenerate skeptics are going to believe what they want to believe. They're going to believe the evidence confirms their current unbiblical beliefs. So let's move on in our notes. Let's look at next the outline point, purpose and theme. The book of Joshua serves several purposes and encompasses various themes that are integral to its narrative and theological message. Here are the primary purposes and themes of the book. Number 1, documentation of conquest. Joshua narrates the Israelites' conquest of Canaan, providing a record of how they entered, settled, and established themselves in the promised land as a fulfillment of God's promise to Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joshua, and Moses. Point number 2, theological instruction. The book illustrates God's faithfulness in fulfilling his promises and portraying his sovereignty over nations. Joshua serves as a reminder of the importance of obedience to God and the consequences of disobedience. Purpose or theme number 3, establishment of identity. By recounting the conquests and the allocation of land, Joshua helps establish the identity of the Israelites as God's chosen people in a land designated for them, reinforcing their covenant relationship with God. This solidifies in the minds of the Israel people at the time of the events of the book of Joshua and the writing of the book of Joshua. This solidifies, what's that? Oh, just shadow of my mustache. Sorry about that. This solidifies the book of Joshua as reinforcing the covenant relationship of Israel and God. And point number 4, under themes and purpose, encouragement and leadership. The book emphasizes Joshua's role as a leader and encourages the Israelites to remain faithful and courageous in the face of challenges, highlighting the importance of strong and faithful leadership in their community. And so those were 4 purposes for writing the book. Now, the themes that you see within these purposes are the faithfulness of God. Throughout the narrative, God's faithfulness to his covenant and promises is a central theme. The victories in battle and the successes of the Israelites are attributed to God's guidance and support. Theme number 2, covenant and obedience. The theme of covenantal faithfulness is prominent. Obedience to God's commands leads to blessings, while disobedience invites consequences. This is highlighted in both the narratives of conquest and the warnings given to Israel. Theme number 3, divine guidance. Joshua's dependence on God is evident as he seeks God's direction in critical moments, underscoring the necessity of divine help in achieving human goals. Then we come to judgment and mercy. The conquest accounts reflect themes of judgment against the Canaanite nations for their sins and idolatry, juxtaposed with God's mercy towards the Israelites. Rahab's story in Joshua 2 exemplifies the merciful aspect of Yahweh toward those who show faith. Theme number 5, the land and the inheritance. The concept of land as a divine inheritance is central, portraying Canaan not only as a physical territory, but also as a symbol of God's promises and blessings for his people. Theme number 6, community and unity. The allocation of land to the 12 tribes emphasizes communal identity and the importance of unity among Israelite tribes as they work together to settle and maintain the land. The book of Joshua is essential for understanding the transition from wandering in the wilderness to life in the promised land. Its themes resonate with the larger narrative of the Bible and highlight the significance of faith, obedience, and God's enduring presence with his people. So the next point in our study is who are the main characters. The book of Joshua features several key characters, each playing a significant role in the narrative of the Israelites' conquest of Canaan. Now here are the main ones. The first one would be Joshua. The central figure, Joshua, serves as the leader of the Israelites after Moses' death. He is a military leader and a faithful servant of God. He's known for his courage, faithfulness, and strong leadership qualities. Joshua exemplifies obedience to God and reliance on divine guidance throughout the conquest. Now remember, he is the same person who, along with Caleb, were sent into the land ahead of the nation of Israel to spy it out, to see what it was like. And he came back with a good report. It's a great land, and we can take it. God will help us take it. But the other 10 spies said, no, we can't go. They'll defeat us. So that's who Joshua is. It's the same person. Number 2 key character would be Moses. Although Moses does not appear in the narrative after his death, he is a critical figure in the background. Joshua served as Moses' assistant during the Exodus and was chosen as his successor. Moses represented the law and the covenant between God and Israel, and his leadership set the stage for the Israelites to enter the promised land. It's like the idea of Moses or the spirit of Moses still resonated, still echoed in the minds of the people. Then you have another key character, Rahab, a woman from Canaan. She is said to have been a prostitute living in Jericho. Now, some people say that the word that is translated prostitute doesn't necessarily mean prostitute, that it can also mean someone who keeps a hotel and has many guests that come and stay for pay in their room. Traditionally, historically, she's been referred to as a prostitute, however. Now, Rahab plays a pivotal role by harboring Israelite spies and helping them escape. See, it's possible that she just ran a hotel. She demonstrates faith in Yahweh by recognizing Israel's God as the true God. Her bravery and quick thinking save her family during Jericho's destruction. Now, Rahab is including in the lineage of Jesus, highlighting God's mercy and inclusion of Gentiles in his covenant. And then collectively, the Israelite spies are key characters in the book of Joshua. Joshua sends 2 spies to scout the land of Canaan, specifically Jericho. So, following in the tradition of Moses, when Moses sent out the 12 spies, Joshua just sends out 2 because they want to spy out the land very surreptitiously. And these spies come back with a report, and especially the information provided by Rahab, which helps confirm the plan for the conquest. Main character number 5, the Gibeonites. And again, this is a main character seen in a group of people. This is a group of Canaanites who deceive the Israelites. They deceive them into making a peace treaty by pretending to be from a distant land. And the Gibeonites are spared because of this because of a treaty that they make with the Israelites. And this illustrates themes of deception, consequences, and the complexities of the Israelite conquest. Point number 6, the tribes of Israel. Now this is main character number 6, the tribes of Israel. Again, a collective. The 12 tribes, for example, Judah, Ephraim, Manasseh, etc., each receive a portion of land in Canaan. Their leaders and representatives play vital roles in the distribution of territory and the collective decisions following the conquests. Their unity and actions illustrate the fulfillment of God's promise of land and identity for his people. Now remember that Joseph, because of his faithful service, when the Israelites escaped the famine of Israel that was coming into the Canaan land, and they went to Egypt, and Joshua was a leader there and fed them and saved the people. His reward for doing that was a double portion in possession of the land. And so his 2 children, Ephraim and Manasseh, often take the place of the name of Joseph in the lists of the 12 tribes. And so, moving on here, Eleazar. Now, Eleazar is the son of Aaron, and he's a priest during Joshua's leadership. He plays a key role in the religious and ceremonial aspects of the community, especially involving the distribution of the land among the tribes. And then main character number 8, Caleb. He's one of the 12 spies sent by Moses and an important figure who, along with Joshua, his fellow spy, encouraged the Israelites to enter Canaan with faith in God's promise. Now Caleb receives a portion of land in Hebron as a reward for his faith and courage. Each of these characters contributes to the overarching story of the Israelites' journey into the Promised Land, highlighting themes of faith, obedience, leadership, and the fulfillment of God's promises. So let's look at the structure now. Every literary work has a structure, and the book of Joshua has a distinct literary structure. that can be broken down into several key sections. So here's an overview of its main components. Chapter 1 is an introduction. This section introduces Joshua as the new leader of Israel after Moses' death. It establishes the theme of conquest and God's promise of land to the Israelites. Then, structural point number 2, preparation for conquest, Joshua 1 through 5, and 12. Now, this section covers the preparations for entering the Promised Land, including the commissioning of Joshua, the sending of spies, and particularly the story of Rahab, and the crossing of the Jordan River. The renewal of covenantal obligations and the establishment of memorial stones are significant events. So, structural point number 3, the conquest of Canaan. Joshua 5:13 through 12:24, one of the main larger sections of the book. This central section details the military campaigns against various Canaanite cities and kings. It is often divided into two main parts. The central campaign, see Joshua 5:13, 8 through 29, and focuses on the conquest of Jericho and Ai. And the southern campaign, Joshua chapter 10, and this covers the battles against a coalition of southern kings. And then a relatively more minor in length anyway section, the northern campaign. So I suppose you could say that there were 3 points, 2 of them main points in this section of conquest. But it is the northern campaign, Joshua chapter 11, and it speaks of the conquest of northern Canaan. Structural point number 4, division of the land, Joshua 13 through 21, chapters 13 through 21. After the conquest, the book describes the allocation of the land among the tribes of Israel. This section includes detailed descriptions of boundaries and cities of refuge, emphasizing the organization and the settlement of the Israelite tribes. Well, it looks like I'm losing my light. Some of the video that I do is using natural light to help. Let me see if I can get a little more light here. Well, that's almost too much light, but that's the best I can do for now. So, I'm not sure if we covered this point, so I'll cover it again just in case. The division of the land, Joshua 13 through 21. After the conquest, the book describes the allocation of land among the tribes of Israel. This section includes detailed descriptions of boundaries and cities of refuge, emphasizing the organization and settlement of the Israelite tribes. Then we get to section number 5, Joshua's final addresses. See these in Joshua chapters 22 through 24. These concluding chapters contain Joshua's farewell speeches, where he reiterates the importance of faithfulness to God and the covenant. He reminds the Israelites of their history and urges them to choose fidelity to God. Then we have structural point number 6, the epilogue, Joshua chapter 24, verses 29 through 33. The final verses record the death of Joshua and the burial of other important figures, signaling the end of an era and the continuation of the Israelites' history in the Promised Land. The literary structure of Joshua effectively supports its themes, showing the transition of the Israelites from wandering in the desert to taking possession of and settling in Canaan. It covers a period of about 40 years or so, thereabouts, give or take. And then the next section of Scripture we go into would be the book of Judges. That'll be the next book that we cover. And the book of Judges encompasses about 400 years of time. So a lot of changes in terms of the amount of time that each of these books cover. The Pentateuch, of course, covered from creation right up to and through the beginnings of the Exodus. So that's centuries and centuries and centuries of time. But then the Exodus touches on the first 40 years of Moses' life, the middle 40 years when he's in the wilderness, the final 40 years when he's leading the nation of Israel, so about 120 years for the rest of the Pentateuch, and then Joshua, the conquest of the land. Altogether, the whole book covers approximately 40 years. Didn't take him that long to conquer the land. Experts say that it took him maybe 10 years to conquer the land. But of course, then after they did, you have what we just saw was the division of the land and sorting it out among the tribes. So now that's the structure. Let's look at the storyline for the book of Joshua. Now this covers Joshua more in a narrative way. And so again, preparation and entry. Joshua all begins with a divine command to Joshua to lead the Israelites across the Jordan River into Canaan. God promises Joshua every place where he sets his foot will be given to him, just as he had promised to Moses. Joshua 1 verse 3. To prepare for this monumental task, Joshua sends 2 spies to scout the land, particularly the city of Jericho. The spies are sheltered by Rahab, a prostitute or maybe just a hotel keeper in Jericho, who recognizes their mission and aids their escape, agreeing to help them in return for the safety of her family. Joshua 2, 1 through 21. So the crossing of the Jordan River is a miraculous event. As the priests carrying the Ark of the Covenant step into the river, the waters are miraculously halted, allowing the Israelites to cross on dry ground. See Joshua 3, 14 through 17. This event reaffirms God's presence and power to the people as it was with Moses 40 years before. And it marks a significant moment of transition from wandering in the desert to taking possession of the land. First, however, all those born in the wilderness had to be circumcised. Oh, nobody looked forward to that. See Joshua 5, verse 2 through 9. The second section in the storyline has to do with the conquest of Jericho. This is the first major battle in the conquest of Canaan, and it happens when Joshua follows God's unconventional strategy. The Israelites march around the city once each day for 6 days, with the Ark of the Covenant leading the way and 7 priests blowing trumpets. Nobody's speaking. Everybody's quiet. On the 7th day, they circle the city 7 times. And on Joshua's command, the priests blow their trumpets really loud, and the people shout really loud. And as they do, the walls of Jericho collapse, allowing the Israelites to capture the city. Rahab and her family are spared as promised, Joshua 6, 1 through 25. Following Jericho, the Israelites attempt to capture Ai, but initially fail due to the sin of Achan, who had taken forbidden spoils from Jericho. After resolving this issue through the execution of Achan and his whole family and his livestock and burning all his possessions, disobedience to Yahweh was treated quite severely. The Israelites then successfully captured Ai. See Joshua 7, 1 through 26, and 8, 1 through 29. Joshua then renews the covenant with God by building an altar on Mount Ebal and reading the law to the people. See Joshua 8, 30 through 35. Now imagine, let your imagination go. Imagine the drama of the entire nation, several million people gathered between Mount Ebal and Mount Gerizim. Millions. Moses had directed Joshua to read the law, blessings, and cursings aloud for all to hear and to commit to following the Lord. In Joshua 8, after the Israelites' victory over Ai, Joshua leads the people to fulfill that command given by Moses in Deuteronomy 27. They travel to the valley between Mount Ebal and Mount Gerizim, and there Joshua builds an altar to the Lord on Mount Ebal using uncut stones as instructed by Moses. On this altar, they offer burnt offerings and peace offerings. Joshua then writes a copy of the law of Moses on stones. The entire assembly of Israel, including women, children, and foreigners living among them, gather in this valley. Half the people stand in front of Mount Gerizim, the other half in front of Mount Ebal, as Moses had directed for the blessings and the cursings. Several million people on each side of the valley. And they're listening to Joshua read the law. And as they do, as they listen, Joshua asks them to affirm whether they will abide by the law or not. And several million voices ring out, "We will do all the Lord asks us to do." Now after this, the narrative continues with several more battles and alliances. The Gibeonites, fearing the Israelites, deceive them into making a peace treaty. But despite the deceit, the Israelites honor the treaty and are later forced to defend the Gibeonites when a collection of Amorite kings attack them. The Israelites achieve a significant victory with the sun standing still in the sky as a divine sign to ensure their success. Joshua 9, 1 through 27, and 10, 1 through 15. Now, skeptics, critical scholars, will say, well, that can't be. The earth can't stop its rotation to make the sun appear like it's standing still in the sky. That couldn't have happened that way. That's figurative language. Evangelicals say the God who created everything just by thinking and then speaking it into existence, it would be no big thing for him to stop the earth from spinning. And skeptics would say, well, we are on a 1,000 mile an hour momentum as the earth spins 1,000 miles an hour. And to stop the earth would destroy everything on the earth. Buildings would be like hitting a brick wall. People would go flying forward 1,000 miles an hour. Buildings would be instantly crushed. As I said, the God who spoke everything into existence, by thinking it and then speaking it, that would be no big problem for him. You got to have the right mindset. You got to have the right worldview to get a grip on some of these things. And so then the next storyline structure is the division of the land. With the major Canaanite cities conquered, the focus shifts to the dividing of the land among the 12 tribes of Israel. Joshua conducts a survey and apportions the land according to the tribes, ensuring each receives its designated territory. See Joshua chapters 13 through 21. This division is both a fulfillment of God's promise and a practical step for establishing the Israelites' new society. These key events include the miraculous crossing of the Jordan River, the fall of Jericho, the initial defeat at Ai and ultimate victory there, and various military victories. These events are attributed not to Israel's military might, but to God's direct intervention, affirming his faithfulness in fulfilling the promises made to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. See Genesis 12, verse 7, 26, verse 3, 28, verse 13. Now, after the Israelites had conquered the promised land and settled into their tribes, Joshua called for a covenant renewal ceremony. He gathered all the tribes of Israel at Shechem, a central and significant location in the land of Canaan. This event occurs in Joshua chapter 24. Again, millions and millions of people congregate in one particular place in the land of Israel. The exact number of years between Ebal Gerizim and Shechem meetings is not explicitly stated in the Bible, but it can be inferred that it was a relatively short period. Joshua led the Israelites for about 25 to 30 years or 40 years roughly, and both events occurred within his leadership. The gathering at Mount Ebal and Mount Gerizim would have taken place fairly soon after the initial conquest. And while the gathering at Shechem happened as Joshua neared the end of his life. So it had to be within the entry of Canaan, and then took him about 10 years, so sometime after that 10-year period, that's when this event happened. At Shechem, Joshua addressed the people and reminded them of their history, from their ancestors, including Abraham, to their recent experiences in Egypt and the wilderness. He recounted how God had been faithful to them, bringing them to the land they now inhabited. Joshua then challenged the people to choose whom they would serve, the Lord, Yahweh, or the false gods of the surrounding nations. The people responded, declaring their commitment to the Lord. Joshua then made a covenant with them, setting up a large stone as a witness to their promise. This stone was meant to serve as a reminder of their commitment and the consequences of breaking it. This event was a pivotal moment in Israelite history, reinforcing their dedication to God and establishing a foundational covenant that would shape their identity and relationship with God forever, even up to this modern period. Joshua, as the nation's moral and spiritual guide, urges the Israelites to renew their covenant with God. This is a most famously captured in his exhortation, quote, "Choose this day whom you will serve." You can just hear him shouting this out among the millions and different representatives of each tribe, repeating it and shouting it again, and then other representatives shouting it again as this refrain echoed throughout all the people. Choose this day whom you will serve. And Joshua continues, but as for me and my house, we will serve Yahweh. See Joshua 24, verse 15. And so the book concludes with Joshua's farewell address, his exhortation to the children of Israel to remain faithful to God, reinforcing the covenant and the need for obedience to ensure continued blessings in the land. Joshua 23 through 24. And so the Israelites are settled in the promised land after about 30 years or 40 years of war, although there are hints at future challenges in maintaining faithfulness to God. Ultimately, Joshua underscores God's sovereignty, faithfulness, and the crucial importance of obedient faith. And so this has been your host, your old pal Papa Dale. The year is 2024. The lecture that you just watched is Joshua, part 1 of 3. And greater insights leading to deeper relationship with Jesus Christ await you. So keep watching the videos and keep studying the scripture. Please remember to read the printed notes and look up the scripture citations if you are studying for the biblical literature degree, the Bachelor of Arts degree in biblical literature. And you can find these notes in the video transcript or at the link to the John Huss Institute blog below. Till I see you in the next video, this is your old pal Papa Dale saying I'm going to pray for you that you're going to be well and that you're going to be blessed.